Good evening, welcome along. The transfer window is open. That means the transfer show is back. Great to have you with us for the first time this month. And with their ears to the ground for us this evening, our reporters Mark McAdam and Dharmesh Sheth. Now on the way, the market is growing for Marcus Rashford, with interest from growing for Italy in Manchester United's out of favour.
Is Victor Osimhen moving further away from Manchester United? The truth behind his transfer hunt. When you think about the perfect striker for Manchester United, what comes to mind? Goals, pace, power, and the ability to lead the line in the biggest games. Victor Osimhen ticks all these boxes and more. But here's the question that's keeping United fans awake at night. Is the Nigerian superstar slipping away from Old Trafford before the club even gets a real chance to sign him? The latest reports suggest that Manchester United are now far behind in the race for Osimhen's signature. This news hits hard, especially when you consider that United desperately need a world-class striker to compete at the highest level. So what's really going on with this transfer saga, and should United fans start looking elsewhere? The Osimhen story so far. Let's start from the beginning. Victor Osimhen isn't just any striker, he's a goal machine who has proven himself across different leagues and competitions. Last season, while on loan at Galatasaray, he absolutely exploded onto the scene with 37 goals in just 41 games. Think about that for a moment. That's almost a goal per game at the highest level of Turkish football. But this wasn't a one-season wonder. Before his loan move, Osimhen had already established himself as one of Europe's most deadly strikers during his time at Napoli. Over 133 appearances for the Italian club, he found the back of the net 76 times. These aren't just impressive numbers, they're the kind of stats that make you sit up and take notice. So why did he end up on loan at Galatasaray? The simple answer is that his relationship with Napoli broke down. Sometimes in football, things just don't work out between a player and a club, no matter how good the player is or how successful they've been together. Osimhen needed a fresh start, and Galatasaray gave him exactly that. Who wants Osimhen? Here's where things get interesting and competitive. When a striker of Osimhen's quality becomes available, you can bet that Europe's biggest clubs will come knocking. And that's exactly what's happening right now. 8 major clubs are seriously interested in signing the 26-year-old striker. From the Premier League, we have Manchester United, Chelsea, and Arsenal all keeping close tabs on him. That's 3 of England's biggest clubs fighting for the same player. But the competition doesn't stop there. In Italy, both Juventus and AC Milan are interested. In France, Paris Saint-Germain want him. And perhaps most importantly, Real Madrid, one of the biggest clubs in world football, are also in the mix. Then there's Galatasaray themselves, who obviously want to keep him permanently after such a successful loan spell. Can you blame them? When a player scores 37 goals in a season for your club, you definitely want to keep him around. The Champions League problem. Now we get to the heart of why Manchester United are struggling in this race. Osimhen has made it clear that playing in the Champions League is extremely important to him. This isn't unusual. Most top players want to test themselves against the best teams in Europe on the biggest stage. Here's the problem for United. They didn't qualify for the Champions League this season. In fact, they didn't qualify for any European competition at all. For a club of United's size and history, this is embarrassing. But more importantly for this transfer, it puts them at a massive disadvantage. Think about it from Osimhen's perspective. He's 26 years old, entering what should be the prime years of his career. He wants to play in the Champions League, score goals against Barcelona, Real Madrid, Bayern Munich, and other European giants. If he signs for Manchester United, he won't get that opportunity next season. Compare that to his other options. Chelsea finished in the European places and will be back in continental competition. Arsenal are in the Champions League. Real Madrid are the defending Champions League winners. Paris Saint-Germain are always in the Champions League. Even Juventus, despite their recent struggles, have qualified for European competition. This Champions League requirement doesn't just hurt United, it also damages AC Milan's chances, as they also failed to qualify for European football. So United aren't alone in facing this obstacle, but that doesn't make it any less frustrating for the club and its fans. Money talks, but is it enough? Of course, We can't talk about modern football transfers without discussing money. Napoli have set their price for Osimhen, and it's not cheap. Any non-Italian club that wants to sign him will need to pay his full release clause of €75 million. That's about £64 million or $87 million. Is that a lot of money? Absolutely. But is it worth it for a striker of Osimhen's quality? Many would argue yes. In today's market, proven goal scorers don't come cheap, and Osimhen has shown he can score goals consistently in different leagues and competitions. Manchester United certainly have the money to pay this fee. The club has spent heavily in recent transfer windows, and they know they need a top-class striker. But having the money to buy a player and actually being able to convince them to join are two very different things. Interestingly, Italian clubs like Juventus might have a slight advantage here. Instead of paying the full release clause, they can negotiate directly with Napoli. This could potentially lead to a lower fee or better payment terms. However, this advantage might not matter much if Osimhen is determined to play Champions League football. The Saudi Arabia factor. Here's something that shows just how determined Osimhen is to make the right career choice. He recently turned down a massive offer from Saudi Arabia. Al Hilal, one of the biggest clubs in the Saudi Pro League, made an offer that would have made him one of the highest-paid footballers in the world. But Osimhen said no. This tells us a lot about his priorities. He's not just chasing the biggest paycheck, he wants to play at the highest level and compete for the biggest trophies. This should actually give Manchester United some hope. It shows that Osimhen values sporting success over pure financial gain. However, it also raises the bar for what United need to offer him. They can't just rely on a big salary to convince him. They need to show him a clear plan for getting back to the top of European football. Time is on his side. One thing working against clubs hoping for a quick resolution is that Osimhen isn't in any rush to make his decision. He's taking his time to carefully consider each option, looking at both the sporting projects and the financial offers from different clubs. This measured approach makes sense. Choosing your next club is one of the most important decisions a footballer can make. It can define the next few years of your career and potentially your entire legacy in the sport. The fact that he's not rushing also means he might even start pre-season training with Napoli on July 15th. This would give him even more time to weigh up his options and see how different clubs' summer transfer activities develop. For Manchester United, this extended timeline could be either good or bad news. On the positive side, it gives them more time to try and convince him that Old Trafford is the right destination, even without Champions League football. On the negative side, it also gives their rivals more time to strengthen their own cases. What this means for Manchester United. So where does this leave Manchester United? The honest answer is in a difficult position. They want one of Europe's best strikers, but they can't offer him what he most wants, Champions League football. This situation highlights a bigger problem at the club. United's failure to qualify for European competition doesn't just affect their revenue and prestige, it also makes it much harder to attract the world's best players. It's a vicious cycle. Without top players, it's harder to get back into the Champions League, but without Champions League football, it's harder to sign top players. However, all is not lost for United. Football is unpredictable, and players sometimes make decisions that surprise everyone. Maybe Osimhen will be convinced by United's history, their passionate fan base, or their plans for the future. Maybe he'll decide that helping United get back to the top of European football is an exciting challenge worth taking on. The club could also try to sweeten the deal in other ways. They could offer him a starring role in their rebuild, make him the face of their new era, or structure a deal that rewards him if they qualify for the Champions League in future seasons. The competition analysis. Let's be realistic about United's competition for Osimhen's signature. Each of the other interested clubs has something attractive to offer. Chelsea can offer Premier League football plus European competition. They're also in the middle of their own rebuild and could offer Osimhen a central role in their plans. Plus, London is an attractive city for many international players. Arsenal are an interesting option. They're back in the Champions League and have built an exciting young team under Mikel Arteta. Osimhen could be the final piece of their puzzle as they try to challenge for the Premier League title. Real Madrid might be the most attractive option of all. They're the most successful club in Champions League history, they just won the competition again, and they can offer almost any player the chance to become a legend. If Real Madrid seriously want Osimhen, they'll be very hard to beat. Paris Saint-Germain have money and Champions League football, but they're in a weaker league than the Premier League or La Liga. However, they can offer guaranteed trophies and the chance to play alongside other world-class players. Juventus are a sleeping giant trying to wake up. They have history, Champions League football, and the appeal of Italian football, which Osimhen already knows from his time at Napoli. Even Galatasaray shouldn't be underestimated. Osimhen was clearly happy there. He knows the club and the league, and they'll fight hard to keep their star player. What United need to do? If Manchester United are serious about signing Osimhen, they need to act smart and act fast. Here are some things they could consider. First, they need to present a clear and convincing vision for the future. Osimhen needs to believe that United will be back in the Champions League soon and competing for major trophies. This means showing him their transfer plans, their tactical approach, and their long-term strategy. Second, they could get creative with the contract structure. Maybe they offer bonuses for Champions League qualification, or clauses that improve his terms if the club achieves certain targets. This shows they're confident in their plans and willing to put their money where their mouth is. Third, they need to use their advantages. United remain one of the biggest clubs in world football with an incredible history and passionate fan base. Old Trafford is still one of the most iconic stadiums in the sport. These things matter to many players. Finally, they might need to accept that this deal is unlikely and have backup plans ready. The transfer market is unpredictable, and sometimes the best strategy is to have multiple options rather than putting all your eggs in one basket. The bigger picture. The Osimhen situation is about more than just one transfer. It's a reflection of where Manchester United currently stand in world football. The fact that they're far behind in the race for a top striker because they can't offer Champions League football should be a wake-up call for everyone at the club. This is what happens when a big club allows its standards to slip. It's not just about losing games or disappointing fans, it's about losing the ability to attract the players you need to be successful. And without those players, it becomes even harder to get back to where you want to be. But football has a way of changing quickly. A few good signings, a strong season, and suddenly United could be back among Europe's elite. The question is whether they can make that happen fast enough to convince players like Osimhen that Old Trafford is still the place to be. What happens next? So what should United fans expect in the coming weeks and months? The realistic answer is that Osimhen will probably end up somewhere else. The Champions League requirement seems to be a deal-breaker, and there are too many attractive alternatives available to him. However, football transfers are never straightforward. Sometimes deals fall through at the last minute, sometimes players change their minds, and sometimes clubs that seem to be out of the running suddenly become favorites overnight. The extended timeline actually works in everyone's favor. It gives Osimhen more time to consider all his options, it gives clubs more time to make their cases, and it gives the transfer market more time to develop in unexpected ways. For United, the focus should probably be on making sure they have good alternatives lined up. If they can't get Osimhen, they need to be ready to move quickly for other targets. The worst thing would be to spend the whole summer chasing a player they can't get while missing out on others they could have signed. The final word. The Victor Osimhen transfer saga perfectly captures the current state of Manchester United. Here's a club with history, money, and ambition, but without the one thing that many top players want most: Champions League football. It's frustrating for United fans to see their club described as far behind in the race for any player, especially one who could make such a difference to their team. But it's also a reminder of how important it is to get back to competing at the highest level. Will Osimhen end up at Old Trafford? Probably not, based on everything we know right now. But stranger things have happened in football, and United fans have learned not to give up hope until a player actually signs for someone else. What's certain is that this situation shows United exactly what they need to do. Get back in the Champions League, start competing for trophies again, and prove that Old Trafford is still a destination that the world's best players dream of joining. Until that happens, stories like this one will keep repeating themselves.